Hi, my name is Andy Fingerhut, and I'd like to give you a brief demo of the Clojure Namespace browser, which has been developed by Frank Ziebenlist and myself. I'm in a small Leiningen project of my own called text.unicode, but this should work in any Leiningen project you have. I'm going to go through the installation steps very quickly. If you miss any of them, they are all on the GitHub page for the Clojure Namespace browser project. First one is to add this dev dependencies line. You can check the GitHub page for the latest version. Then run dependencies to pull that in, and then start a REPL. There's one namespace to use before you can start the browser, or at least makes it easier to use the stock macro without having to prefix it with the namespace every time. And that brings up this browser window, which I'll now resize. You may need to look for it if it didn't appear in front. Sometimes it appears behind other windows for me. And I'm going to reduce the font size a little bit so things fit better. Okay, on the left here we have a list of namespaces. These are all the namespaces that are loaded into this Clojure REPL session and either required or used by something. And it includes many namespaces that are part of the, they're there specifically because of the Clojure namespace browser. They aren't part of my project. They're all mixed in together there. Okay, in the middle here, let me click on this clojure.java.shell namespace, and in the middle here we see a list of vars that are in that namespace. Vars are just names for mutable references to things such as functions or macros or objects that you define in your Clojure code with the def macro. I'm going to look at one of these, sh. Over here we see the fully qualified name for this symbol, meaning it simply has the namespace slash and then the symbol name after that, and that gives it a unique name among all all symbols and all namespaces. And beneath that we have the browser has identified this as a function. This is the doc string or documentation string that the user, the author of this function wrote when they created the function. And after the doc string we have a URL to a clojuredocs.org web page with some more information about it. So this is something much like you would get from just using the doc macro at the Clojure REPL, but let me show you some other things that you can also get to the Clojure REPL, but the idea of the browser is that it's quick and easy to get at these things. So if I go up to this pop-up menu here, I can choose to show the source code for this function instead. It includes the doc string, and then down here the actual source code for the function. We can choose to show examples. These are examples pulled from the clojuredocs.org website. Live, when I just chose examples, it went and fetched it over the internet. We can also choose to show comments from that website, of which there are none for this function. See alsos are also from that website. These are other related symbols. We can show the type and the value. Functions don't show up as particularly interesting looking values, but we'll see some others later that are perhaps more useful. And we can also look at the metadata for this function, which if this or any other functions defined with defin automatically have metadata such as the file it was defined in, what line number, doc string, and several other things that you can see here. We can also choose to show all of these things, and then it will show doc string followed by examples, no comments, see alsos, type, value, metadata, and then source code. I'll leave it on the all setting for a while, but sometimes it's nice to be able to focus on only one of these. The browser queries the clojuredocs.org website every time you show examples, comments, or see alsos. And every time you click on another one of these symbols, there can be a noticeable pause while it goes and fetches those things from the website. There's a way to speed that up. If you go to the Docs menu and choose Clojure Docs Update Local Repo, it goes to a GitHub repository of mine that contains a single file that contains all of the Clojure docs info that the browser uses in one single file. Right now, as of May 2012, it's only about 1.5 megabytes, so don't hesitate to download a copy if you've got plenty of disk space. And if we do that and then we change it to offline and or local mode, now we see this message. It tells us it's stored in this dot file. The snapshot was created on April 28th, and it has this many different Clojure symbols in it. And now when we go through these, it should show up much more quickly, and it doesn't go over the internet every time to pull it from the Clojure Docs website. This online offline setting is actually saved from one browser session to another. So even if you quit the REPL, the fact that you chose this is saved in a dot file in your home directory separately from the local repo. Right now, the only other settings that are saved in that way, besides this online offline, are the setting of these 3 on-off settings under the vars menu, which we'll talk about later. Let's look at a few other values and how they are shown in the browser. Here we have shdir, which has a var which is nil, type is blank because nil has no type or class, and it shows up with the value nil there. Let's look at in Clojure.core for a few examples, like file is a string, and here we see its value as a string. We've already seen a function earlier. If we look at a Clojure macro like and go down to the type and value, it actually looks quite similar to the function, and in fact that's because Clojure macros are simply special functions under the covers that transform some Clojure code into other Clojure code. Let's look down for char name string for a different type. It has type clojure.lang.persistent array map. It's a map type, and its value here we see is shown in literal syntax with curly brackets and key value pairs. So that's a relatively small map. Let's look at a much bigger one. If we look in cdclient.core, up at this. Now this has a type of, is a ref, so that's one of Clojure's concurrent types where you can do synchronized updating of multiple refs instead of transactions. So it's a var, points at a ref, and inside the ref its value is a large Clojure map, and the pretty printing used here has a maximum limit on the depth of nesting that it will print and the maximum length of a sequential list of items that it will print. So here we see something like 20 or 30 items followed by an ellipsis ... That's a sign that the print length has been exceeded for that data structure. And then if you ever see a hash mark like this, $, that means that the nesting depth has been exceeded, and there is more detail there, which you would see if you printed this at the REPL without those level or depth restrictions. All right, let's do some searching. If we go up to this box and enter a string like and, pick a namespace, it will show you only those vars that contain that string within their names. That's useful. That's like the apropos command of the REPL. But we can also turn on this option here, search docs also, and now it will find symbols that contain and in their names, like command line args, but also other symbols like error that obviously do not have it in their name. But if we look over in the documentation string, there's an occurrence of and in the middle of a word in its documentation string, and all of these will have the string and somewhere in their documentation string. If I try helper, these obviously don't have it in there, but over in the documentation string it does appear. And then if we turn off search docs also, none of the symbols have helper in their names, so we have nothing that shows up in the list below. We can also do searching and other browsing operations with multiple namespaces selected at one time. To select a contiguous range of namespaces, click on one and then shift-click on another one. Now you'll see that in the list of vars, all of the names have become fully qualified, so you can tell which namespace each of these symbols comes from. If you want to select an arbitrary set of namespaces, you can use Control-click on Windows or Linux and Command-click on a Mac to toggle selection of individual namespaces on or off, like so. And if you want to select all of the namespaces, click on any one of them just to direct the next keystroke action to the list of namespaces, and then Control-A on Windows and Linux, Command-A on a Mac will select all of the namespaces. And now you can see not only we have 71 namespaces, but 2,191 vars in all of those namespaces. And we can now search in those. So I can use with, and here's all of the symbols contained within the name. And I can also do, if I want to do helper again, for example, and turn search docs also. Now here are all the symbols that have helper somewhere in their name or doc string. In this case, only in the doc string.